Museum of History Studios. You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Ask a Gettysburg Guide, Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. And today we are talking with our friend Louis Trott, licensed battlefield guide extraordinaire. And we're talking about Lee's plan on July 3rd, 1863. Back in September of 24, one of our Get Out of the Car tours was this exact subject. With Louis. And Louis, you said, what did you say? You were disappointed?
Disappointed.
Why were you disappointed?
From conception to implementation, something got lost in the sauce in my own mind.
Okay.
It just didn't go.
Do you remember what your conception was?
Well, last year I had thought we'll do a few of the tours based on individuals. We did Hancock. We did Doubleday.
Yeah.
And one of those, what came of that was I wanted to do Lee. Well, what about Lee? And the big event is Pickett's Charge. For a lot of people, that's all they know. So I thought, what was he thinking on July 3rd? That's probably the most controversial aspect of the 3 days. And so I thought that.
He was probably thinking, the hell was I thinking?
Yeah.
By the end.
And so that was my original plan. I go through and I have it all in my head. Then we know we have this long break in between tours because admin stuff, bureaucracy. And then, certain things just stuck in my craw about the bureaucracy. And I started thinking more about those things than what I wanted to talk about on the tour.
Yeah.
And so I remember I spent probably a good 10 minutes just venting.
Yeah.
And that threw me off. That, my mindset went from the subject at hand to something else that didn't have anything to do with what we were there for.
Right.
And I could never really get my mind back to where I wanted it.
Anger is a poison, Louis.
You got to let it go.
Yeah, but it's very hard sometimes.
It is,
I know what you mean. I had my struggles with that in the past year or two, so I get it. But
yeah. So I came away from the tour disappointed in how I delivered it. I didn't think like I said, I didn't, the way I conceived it in my own head didn't come across when I tried to execute it. And that's stuck with me since then.
Okay.
It does. Because when you go out in the public, you want to do a good job.
Sure.
And you want people to at least think, well, he probably halfway knows what he's talking about. I don't think I made it to halfway that day.
Yeah.
So.
Well, all right. But then before we get somebody putting in the comments section the timestamp when we actually get to the history, let's get to the history then. What is, not the history of our anger, but the history of...
way back. 1964 it started.
Robert E. Lee's plan on July 3rd. For the sake of people who are kind of new to all this stuff, can we give a lead up to the 3rd?
Sure.
Okay, so what makes him come up with his plan prior to the morning of July 3rd?
All right. And that is a good thing to do. July 1st, Confederates attack. They end up pushing the Union Army back towards Cemetery Ridge, which includes Cemetery Hill, and the Union Army occupies Culp's Hill. Overnight into July 2nd, the rest of the Union Army's moving up. They occupy Cemetery Ridge all the way down to Little Round Top. Whether they get on Little Round Top is a different story. Confederates attack on July 2nd. They make some headway on the southern end of the field, southern end of Cemetery Ridge. They are unable to take Little Round Top. They do occupy Devil's Den. Most importantly, on that end of the field, they occupy the Peach Orchard, which they can reach the ridge then with their artillery if they can keep that plot of land. And then on the other side of the field, the other side of the fishhook, Culp's Hill, they occupied Lower Culp's Hill that's been evacuated by the Union Army on the evening of July 2nd in response to the emergency that Dan Sickles creates. So the Confederates move in and occupy Lower Culp's Hill and those breastworks that the Union Army spends all day on the second building. July 3rd comes. So this leads into July 3rd. Lee's first plan is to continue the assault and attacking the two ends because they've made headway. They occupy the Peach Orchard and the Confederates are sitting on Lower Culp's Hill. So he wants to bring in Pickett's division. It's the only unused division of the 9 that the Confederates bring here. Have them contribute on the southern end of the field. Have the Confederates attack again the area of Culp's Hill. and try to make headway that way.
So he's continuing on the flanks, as you say, because he has made headway.
Yep.
But also, like, his main objective, I'm gleaning, is to roll up the Union line from both flanks in order to take Cemetery Hill.
Yeah, that's the most important spot on the battlefield. In modern military terms, that is the key terrain. If you had a map and you're marking out the enemy's terrain and you identify those spots that are vital to capture, you put a K in red and circle it, key terrain. And that's the spot on this battlefield. It's cemetery because it's high ground for one, and not all high ground is made the same, but it's high ground. It sits right at the convex of two major roads, the Taneytown Road and the Baltimore Pike. Taneytown Road goes back to Taneytown, further on to Westminster. That's the main supply hub for the Union Army here. The Baltimore Pike, you head south on that, you can end up on Georgia Avenue in Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. You're a long way away from it, but still, those are the two main roads, and those are the only two roads out of the 10 that the Union Army controls here at Gettysburg.
Mm-hmm. And it's their supply line and their retreat line and everything.
Yeah, so if you, I was going to say the Emmitsburg Road's in sort of no man's land. If you control Cemetery Hill, you have control of a piece of either one of those roads or both roads. Right. So that's why it's vital for the Union Army to hold it, and it's also vital if you're trying to get the Union Army to move out of here. And if you can get them to move out of here, it looks like you've defeated them. Mm-hmm. You've got to control that hill, not Little Round Top.
So, okay, right. Okay. And so July 3rd comes along and Lee's saying, we're going to continue, right? We're going to exploit our gains. And we're going to continue to squeeze them.
Yeah.
Now, we're talking about the flanks. What's going on in the center of his line? Is there a plan for them? Like, we're talking AP Hill's guys.
He doesn't really
Ewell
say anything about that initially. And let me get to this real quick. So after the battle, he writes 3 times about this, 3 principal times. The first one is directly after July 4th. He writes to Jefferson Davis. And what he says about this particular day is the next day being July 3rd, the 3rd Division of General Longstreet, having come up, a more extensive attack was made. The works on the enemy's extreme right and left were taken, but his numbers were so great and his position so commanding that our troops were compelled to relinquish their advantage and retired. So, and he lists everybody gets killed. That's immediately after the battle. It's short. This is what's going on. He's writing to the president of the Confederacy, and we're going to have to leave here. Just letting you know. His first report is July 31st. He writes, after a severe struggle, and he's talking about the 2nd, Longstreet succeeded in getting possession of and holding the desired ground. Ewell also carried some of the strong positions which he assailed, and the result was such as to lead to the belief that he would ultimately be able to dislodge the enemy. They're talking about primarily the Peach Orchard, because Devil's Den doesn't mean anything. That's useless ground. And Lower Culp's Hill. Ewell's got a hold of Lower Culp's Hill. These partial successes determined me to continue the assault the next day. And he goes on using Pickett. He's bringing Pickett's 3 fresh brigades. Then in January of 1864, he redoes his official report, but in much greater detail. He probably has more time. That's when they're going into winter quarters. And he says, the result of the day's operations induced the belief, and you're talking about the 2nd again, that with proper concert of action and with increased support, that the positions gained on the right would enable the artillery to render the assaulting columns, which should ultimately succeed, and it was accordingly determined to continue the attack. And that means from the 2 ends. Okay. And he's talking about the position gained for the artillery. That is the Peach Orchard. The general plan was unchanged, and that's the plan from July 2nd. Okay. So he doesn't talk about what's going to happen further up the line with AP Hill's men. He does say that Longstreet can pull from AP Hill because Longstreet is, and we'll get to Longstreet. The the divisions he's using on July 2nd, they get tore up.
Yeah.
Hood more so than McLaws. But they suffered a lot of casualties. You just can't throw them back in and expect the offensive punch that you had the day before. And they do, considering what they do great work on July 2nd.
Sure.
I mean, that's some fighting. So.
Absolutely. So they're going to, so this is in the morning. In other words, this is what's still dark out. This is what is in his mind. This is what we're going to do by the end of July 2nd and in through the early mornings of July 3rd. This is the plan. But then the Union Army often has something to say about a Confederate commander's plan and vice versa, I'm sure.
That's what George Pickett said afterwards.
Yeah, right, exactly.
They open up a cannonade around 4:30 in the morning.
The Union
does. Cannon along Baltimore Pike up on Powers Hill. And what they are doing is they're attempting to drive those Confederates off of Lower Culp's Hill. Eventually they do so. It takes about 7 hours. It's the longest continuous fighting at the Battle of Gettysburg.
Yeah, but just for people who are new, this is over on the right flank of the Union line.
Yeah, Culp's Hill. So it's between. It's on the east side of the Baltimore Pike.
Yeah.
When you're driving up the Baltimore Pike, you're down there where the old. It starts sort of where the old
Mulligan McDuffers,
the putt thing used to be, and they push. Like I said, eventually they push the Confederates off of Lower Culp's Hill. But once that attack starts, that disrupts his plans. Ewell is going to send his infantry forward, and they're going to have this day-long fight with many interesting stories. But the plan for the initial plan for Lee is when Lee hears when Ewell hears Longstreet starting to attack, he's supposed to attack. Instead, he's got Union cannon fire raining down on him, and he sends his men in without Longstreet starting any sort of attack way over on the right side of the Confederate line. So that the Union Army disrupts everything, and that's where we come to.
Right. So now Lee's back to the drawing board.
He's back to the drawing board.
And he's got to figure out what to do. Right, because Longstreet now to continue trying to roll up the left isn't going to really be too effective if Ewell is out of action over on the right. He
realizes that we're definitely going to get concerted action when one force is engaged hours before the other one's ready.
Right.
So further on, he writes, Longstreet, reinforced by Pickett's 3 brigades, which arrived near the battlefield during the afternoon of the 2nd, should have used them then, was ordered to attack the next morning, and General Ewell was directed to assault the enemy's right at the same time. General Longstreet's dispositions were not completed as early as was expected. I don't know the full story of what they're actually talking about between nighttime and morning, July 2nd to the 3rd, but I sort of think this is a little disingenuous,
yeah,
of Lee.
Okay.
I like Lee. He's on the front of my car. But still, I try to be, open and honest with people. But before notice could be sent to General Ewell, General Johnson was already engaged, and it was too late to recall him. The Union Army's attacked, and you're just not going to sit there. They attack back. The enemy attempted to recover the works taken the previous evening, but was repulsed, and General Johnson attacked in turn. General Longstreet was delayed by a force occupying the high rocky hills on the enemy's extreme left, Little Round Top, from which his troops could be attacked in reverse as they advance. And that's what Longstreet tells Lee why he needs to keep the remnants of Hood's brigade and McLaws' brigade all in place instead of using them in this new attack along with General Pickett, because we got this Union force over here to our right. We can't just move everybody to the left. The Union force is going to come down and get in our rear. Further on, a careful examination was made of the ground secured by Longstreet and his batteries placed in positions which it was believed would enable them to silence those of the enemy. Hill's artillery and part of Ewell's was ordered to open simultaneously, and the assaulting column to advance under cover of the combined fire of the three. So that goes into how we're going to conduct this. They're bringing up Pickett's division with his 3 brigades. They're going to Longstreet, because he's using the rest of his corps to guard his right, Longstreet's told, we're going to use troops from A.P. Hill's corps and to soften the ground, which we're going to go over, and to soften the objective, hopefully get up there and punch a hole in it, we're going to use all artillery, all your corps artillery, and we'll get A.P. Hill and then Ewell's artillery to be involved too. So hopefully the plan is to bring this concentrated fire to the area, either silence those guns or just affect the morale enough so when we get up there, we can break through. So there's the plan.
Okay.
It is, that's what I've read is Lee's viewpoint of what happened. So Longstreet's viewpoint's a little bit different. So Longstreet gets unfairly blamed for a lot of things here at Gettysburg. I will say this. So what is, and I talked about this today, and I've told you and your listeners, which are a lot of them are my friends now, I don't have too many original thoughts. I'm just not an original thought guy. I can ruminate all day long and nothing original comes to mind. However, every once in a while, lightning hits the top of my head and boom, wow, that came out of nowhere.
Right.
I'm pretty impressed with myself.
Right.
So I had this other original thought. What is the biggest what if at Gettysburg?
What if? I'm sorry, I didn't mean. What if Jackson were here? Is the big one.
And do what?
He would have taken Culp's Hill. Yeah.
So, and I really don't. The what ifs I usually deal with are things happened here. What if this had been done differently with the people here?
Right.
But how about this one? What if Jackson's here and Longstreet's not?
What if Jackson's here
and Longstreet's not?
Okay.
Jackson never argues with Lee.
Yeah.
Lee's relationship with Jackson is more of a, I'm going to tell you what to do and we're going to make it happen. Mm-hmm. And Jackson never pushes back that I know of. Mm-hmm. Here at Longstreet, according to Longstreet, he pushes back a lot.
Right.
On various things. He pushes back before this campaign starts because he doesn't want to come up here. He wants to go to Tennessee.
Right.
And join Johnson. Bring Johnson to the east. Maybe that's the right idea or not. The difference between it. And he's writing to people in the Confederate Congress about this. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine? We got General Petraeus over there doing this coin thing, asymmetrical warfare. And one of his subordinates is writing people in Congress, hey, we should probably be doing this.
Hey, wouldn't it be the first time?
No, but just, that's not how you operate.
No, it isn't.
Your commander,
it is not, yes.
But that's what Longstreet's doing before this even starts. So, and
I got a what if for you.
Right.
What if Longstreet and Jackson weren't here, but Omar Bradley and George Patton were?
Those tanks would have tore up the ground.
And they would get fined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a permit for that tank, buddy? You better stop right there. But anyway.
No, okay, go ahead.
So my point is, Longstreet unfairly gets blamed for a lot of stuff by his peers after the war. And a lot of it's political, unfortunately. Longstreet has to come back and defend himself, so he goes too far the other way, and he says things that really aren't necessarily truthful. So that just got me thinking, Jackson never has these problems. Now, Jackson doesn't work well with others either.
Yeah,
Jackson works best with independent command. You saw it in the Valley. When they come up, the first Maryland invasion, who does Lee send to Harper's Ferry?
Jackson.
And who does he stay with?
He stays with Longstreet.
Yeah. Why?
Yeah. Because he needs the... But also, isn't it just because Jackson's a stick in the mud? Longstreet's more fun. They gamble.
Yeah, I don't know.
They have fun. Not that Lee wants to partake. He just wants to be around it.
I don't know. I think it's...
You think Longstreet...
Jackson operates very well by himself. Mm-hmm. He's a great independent commander. In the 7 days, when he comes from the Valley, he fails. Yeah. Let's face it.
Yeah.
He just doesn't work well with others.
Right.
Maybe he's tired. I don't know. Everybody's tired at that point, though. He's not the only one. He's on a horse. Little Sorrel's the one that's tired.
Yeah. Right.
He's just a different commander. The overall point is you don't see him arguing with Lee about plans. At Chancellorsville, who does Lee send around? Longstreet's out of the picture. You should have never let Longstreet go. That's why he's so down in troops compared to what Hooker has at Chancellorsville. Jackson's the one that goes around with that force, and he's the one that attacks when he's ready, and it works. Unfortunately, he ends up getting wounded and later loses his life. But it just got me thinking. On to Longstreet, because we're way down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Longstreet would write, on the following morning, our arrangements were made for renewing the attack on my right with a view to pass around the hill occupied by the enemy on his left and to gain it by flank and reverse attack. Now, whose plan is that? That's Longstreet's plan.
Right.
We want to go around to the right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's either Bill Clinton or the guy that played Hood. I don't know.
I feel your pain.
Yeah.
Around on the right.
This would have been slow progress, or been a slow process probably, but I think not very difficult. A few minutes after my orders for the execution of this plan were given, the commanding general joined me and ordered a column of attack to be formed of Pickett's, Heath's, and part of Pender's division, the assault to be made directly at the enemy's main position, the Cemetery Hill. So when I go back to Lee's OR and I say he's a bit disingenuous, if according to Longstreet, he doesn't know what the plan is at this point. He's making up his own plan. We're going to go around to the right. I had people out there looking. It's open. It'll take a little bit, but we can do it.
So I was going to ask you, did he ever reconnoiter the right at this point in order to, not like, well, yeah, I mean, it would be at this point, right? Like after July 2nd's fighting, did he ever have anybody go around to see Longstreet?
He probably did. I guess he says he does.
Yeah.
And since he's getting, Hood wants to go around to the right July 2nd.
Right.
The commanding general says we're going to attack, and we're going to attack. I don't see why he wouldn't have had anybody
I guess
go
my wonderment at this is that, okay, on July 2nd, I can see maybe thinking that would be a good idea. The full Union Army is not together yet. But it's also why it's a bad idea, because they're not together yet.
The Sixth Army's hanging out there somewhere.
The Sixth Corps. Yeah. So there is that. But you wouldn't have the same threat, but you would have I would think, the same caution on July 3rd, especially since the Sixth Corps hasn't been really too heavily engaged, has it?
Not at all.
I mean, just a very little at the end of July 2nd, right?
Yeah.
Down Nevin, is it Nevin or?
They send some regiments over to Culp's Hill. They're engaged.
Nothing down like from Munshauer's Hill, or is that later?
I think it's later. Yeah.
Later.
But very few casualties.
Yeah.
Out of all the Corps, they suffer the least casualties. They are not, other than walking.
So I guess what I'm saying is that they might not be aware that they're on the field yet.
Yeah, that could be.
And so there's still the question of where's the Sixth Corps. And also, the logistics of going around the right, maybe with a partial force. Is he thinking the whole corps? Like he's still going to move his whole corps around?
Yeah, he doesn't really explain it.
He doesn't explain it. Okay.
Again, we're taking his word for it that he does have people reconnoitering that area. Mm-hmm. He's the one. But it gets to, he's doing this in the morning. Lee is saying he's not ready to attack when we were ready to, so Ewell's men went in prematurely. There's a disconnect here with the story.
Right.
We do know that Longstreet doesn't talk to Lee on the evening after everything calms down July 2nd.
I just brought up that point about, moving around to the right and everything like that. And then I look here, and in the call queue, 6 questions is here, and he wants to talk about communication in the Army of Northern Virginia. So while we're on, right, because communication would be important there. Yeah. So let's just ask, go ahead, Mike, how you doing? How you feeling? And what's your question, sir?
Yeah, I'm feeling a lot better today, so
Good.
Thank you. Yeah,
good.
The little bug had me going there for a moment.
Well, there's a lot going around. Everybody's sick here.
You got to avoid those bugs.
So while we're on, right? Sorry, go ahead. I screwed up.
I think looking at the comparison between the Army of the Potomac and the Army of Northern Virginia, General Meade has his council of war on July 2nd. Of course, going over what they're going to do for the next day. Looking at the kerfuffle that happened on the morning of July 3rd, and of course the different accounts that we get afterwards, what was Lee's communication style? I know he didn't hold a council of war, but did he communicate what he was planning or what he was thinking to his subordinates? Do we have any record of him having conversations with his subordinates about what his plans are going to be?
It's a good question, Mike, because it always seems to me that Lee is kind of like, yes, go over there and do this, and yes, go over there and do that, and then he's just kind of sitting in the outhouse because he had diarrhea.
He sort of gives the strategic view on a certain battle, and then lets his subordinates do the tactical.
So so he comes up with the strategy, and he comes up with the objectives, and then he leaves it to his subordinates to figure out. Of course, when he can.
At Chancellorsville, he's more active because he has to be.
He has to because there's a lot smaller army. But it's not that he doesn't take advice and counsel from his subordinates, right?
Yeah.
No, he would take that
open,
too.
Yeah.
But go ahead, answer Mike's question.
I think, well, he does give instructions, and sometimes, like on July 1st, they're ignored, and that's why we're sitting here. He tells them, don't bring on a general engagement until we're all concentrated.
Sure.
And they ignore him. Let me see how that worked out. I think part of the and I've said this before to various people, after Chancellorsville, they reorganized the army because Jackson's gone. So they go from 2 giant corps to 3 more manageable corps.
Yeah.
You got Longstreet. And we see how he can get grumpy at times. But you got these 2 brand new corps commanders. They have a certain style. They've been under Jackson. Jackson tells you where to go, when to go, and how long to stay there, and don't deviate. Mm-hmm. That's not how Lee operates. Mm-hmm. The command style is different. In my view, Lee either ignores this or doesn't recognize this. I'm sure he did. He's a smart guy. He's superintendent of West Point. But he doesn't adjust to them. They clearly don't adjust to him. A good example is when on July 1st, when the orders handed to Richard Ewell, attack that hill if practicable without bringing on further general engagement. Ewell says something, don't they have anybody at headquarters that can write an order?
Yeah.
He's not used to that kind of order because Jackson would have said, attack the hill, use this road, go at this time, and you better be on time, or I'll bring you up on charges.
Right.
Yeah. Lee doesn't adjust the leadership style to these 2 different subordinates, and Longstreet is just, he is displeased with things that are starting to happen on day 1 throughout the whole shebang here. And it says something that Longstreet, after this attack on the second day that is so big, he doesn't go to Lee and say, hey, what are we going to do tomorrow?
Right.
He's like, he seems kind of a bitter commander at this point. You know what? I'm tired of this old man. If he wants me, he knows where to find me.
Right.
And he doesn't go. And you might be bitter, but you're in the military. You need to put that behind you and do what's right for the mission. The mission's first. Your feelings are about 14th.
Yeah.
So I blame both sides, the commander and the subordinates. So I think Lee does communicate, but I think there's other factors going on here, personality factors that play into this, and the communication is definitely lacking during this particular campaign.
And it also kind of seems like, even though they have 3 corps, it seems kind of that Lee, and maybe this is because AP Hill's kind of nowhere to be found, but it seems like Lee is still using the 2-wing the system in a way, because the AP Hill's corps, I guess, is just kind of holding the center, which might be his plan, but like the workhorses of the Army of Northern Virginia in this battle are the 2nd and the 1st Corps.
Well, it looks that way because of the result.
Yes.
If that attack on July 2nd keeps rolling up the line, AP Hill's corps is involved. But you've got Richard Anderson first, who's, again, he's used to being under Longstreet.
Okay.
Longstreet could make him effective. Now he's under a corps commander who's virtually absent for one reason or the other. He doesn't have direct communication, direct orders, so he's rather lethargic in his command. And then the next division commander, who's a superb division commander, Dorsey Pender, is mortally wounded.
Yeah.
Once he's wounded, that's where the attacks peter out. It's along his line with Cornet Posey. And so they're supposed to be involved, They don't have an active corps commander. They got a division commander down, and now you leave it to these brigade commanders that are saying, "Well, I'm not moving until somebody tells me to."
Right.
Nobody's going to tell me.
Right.
To.
Okay. Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Anything else, Mike?
Yeah, and this goes also more to the communication issue within the Army of Northern Virginia as far as staff work is concerned and communication on all levels. I mean, looking at what happened to Anderson's division on July 2nd, and William Mahone's brigade is not involved in the action, and you still have E.L. Thomas's Georgians who are involved in skirmishing, but they're not involved in any major assault in Pender's division. Where do you put kind of the responsibility of communicating, okay, what units are fresh here? What can we use for anything going forward on July 3rd?
And I think I'll get to that because that always comes up with July 3rd. They're using these units, and I used to not argue. I had pleasant disagreements with Pete Carmichael about this because I came to because we did the Robinson division. First day, and I came to the conclusion that the Confederates lose on the first day. They gain ground, but they lose because so many of their brigades get tore up. Iverson's brigade, Scales brigades, Perrin's brigade, O'Neill's brigade.
Where they're really, in other words, to the point where they're really not useful afterwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Confederates can't afford that.
Yeah,
and it comes back to bite them in the rear on July 3rd. So you have these... you have these units that then are asked to move forward on the July 3rd assault, that they're way under, optimal strength, fighting strength, combat efficiency. No units here at Gettysburg are at optimal efficiency. And this is another original. You got a 2-for-1 here, ladies and gentlemen. Embrace it because it's never going to happen again. It'll snow a foot tomorrow before this ever happens again. So I started thinking about this when I was reading one of the regiment, and that's what I've done this winter. I've gone back and started reading regimental histories, Union regimental histories, and it dawned on me, these regiments, when they form up 1,000 men, 10 companies, 100 each, they're a new car. As soon as you drive that new car off the lot, it loses value.
Sure. Yeah.
As soon as these regiments leave their mustered in place where they mustered in and did a little training and come south, they start losing men from disease.
Sure.
And they're never back up to full strength.
Right.
Brand new car.
Yep.
Coming south, wheels about to fall off.
Nothing like driving away.
With
a brand new car.
You feel free to write that down. Just, I got a little copyright sign next to that one. But yeah, and in Lee, and I hope I get to a quote where Lee sees these men and he says, I didn't realize so many had been lost.
Right.
I'll just talk about it now to make sure I get it in, then to answer Mike's question. These units over here, they be to the Confederate left on this side of the field, Seminary Ridge side of the field. AP Hill's line, they do engage in skirmishing throughout the day, and it's heavy enough to hold them in place. And I think in Lee's mind, it would take too long, and this is already taking most of the day, it would take too long to pull out some of these brigades, move them around, and bring in fresh ones. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't have the patience for that. He's already saying, Longstreet's not ready when we were ready, so now we're going to have to do something else. And it's going to take a while to set all this up. So I just think they get engaged. And I have a quote here from one of those brigades saying they were in the heaviest skirmishing that they had engaged in throughout the 3 days. So if you're skirmishing that heavy with troops on Cemetery Hill, it's impossible to move out and switch.
Right.
So, and that's a point where it does go back to communication because he's leaving it up to the Corps commander. Put the troops in. The only troops that Lee seems to be dictating the troops that Longstreet's going to use. All right, you're telling me you can't use these guys, but we're using Pickett. It's obvious choice though.
Yeah.
They're the only ones that haven't been used.
Yeah, freshest.
Yeah.
All right, Mike. Anything else?
Nope. Thank you so much.
Mike, missed you today. I was out with Debbie and Elaine from Leesburg, and missed you.
Oh.
Yeah, we had a good time talking artillery.
Yeah.
I was a little gun bunny hopping around.
All right, Mike, thank you very much for the call. That's the great Mike Lentz, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day, Mike. All right, so go ahead, Lewis. Continue.
And then maybe this will get to Mike's point, too. This is the official report from Major General Robert Rhodes. Doesn't give a date. On the 3rd, my orders were general and the same as those of the day before. Again, he's moved up to Long Lane. He's got 3 regiments with him because he's moved 2 of those regiments over to Ewell's front, O'Neill and Daniels, and they're going to take part in the July assault on Culp's Hill.
All right.
And accordingly, when the heavy cannonade indicated that another attack was made from the right wing of our army, we were on the lookout for another favorable opportunity to cooperate. When the sound of the musketry was heard, it became apparent that the enemy in our front was much excited. The favorable opportunity seemed to me close at hand. I sent word to Lieutenant General Ewell by Major Whiting of my staff that in a few moments I should attack, and immediately had a handful of my men under Doles, Iverson, and Ramser preparing for the onset. But in less than 5 minutes after Major Whiting's departure, before the troops of my immediate right had made any advance or showed any preparation therefore, and just as the order forward was about to be given, it was announced and apparent to me that the attack had already failed. I'll get to the other thing where it tells us about the skirmishing. I think this actually goes to one of the questions that somebody else sent in. But that tells you what Rhodes is doing over there. And that also goes to, is there a second wave planned? I forget the Ranger's name. He retired. He didn't fight at Gettysburg, and that's why I can't remember his name. Smart guy, gave great presentations, but he liked to talk about stuff that, you got to find real evidence for this is the story. And he talked about this second wave. There is evidence of a second wave.
When did he retire?
Last year.
Troy?
Yeah.
Troy Harmon. Yeah. Well, how could you forget Troy?
Because he didn't fight at Gettysburg. I don't know. It's been a long day.
Yeah.
I spent all day walking around the battlefield. So, there is evidence, but I think it's a second wave if the opportunity presents itself. There's nobody saying, all right, you group of men go forward. Behind you, we're going to send this other group.
Yeah.
It's, hey, if you see opportunity, like we've broken that line, and A.P. Hill has been told this too, be ready to send more troops.
Right.
It's sort of, we've got to have the conditions for this second wave. Clearly they're not met. So I don't, when he talks about it, it seems like
it's just waiting to go.
Yeah. And they're waiting on the opportunity. Let's see. Here it is. Getting to Mike's point. This is from our buddy Abner Perrin.
Abner Perrin.
This is August 13th, 1863. Early the next morning, the 3rd, the heaviest skirmishing I had ever witnessed was here kept up during the greater part of the day. The enemy made desperate efforts to recapture the position on account of our skirmishers being within easy range of their artillerists on Cemetery Hill, but we repulsed every assault and held the position until ordered back to the main line at Gettysburg. So they're engaged, according to Colonel Perrin, throughout the day, and it's just hard to extract yourself from that engagement and move. That takes time.
Now, so Perrin is what, like in the Long Lane area? Where's he?
Yeah, he's over more to the left. And I'd have to look at a map. I should have brought.
I should have gotten the.
I don't know if I got any maps in here. No.
I got the Lano book in the back there. Hey, Ty, could you do me a favor? Go out in the hall, and in the bookshelf is the Lano map book. It's it's the spiral map book. It's on the bookshelf right there. That bookshelf, bottom down there somewhere. Big white book with spirals. There it is. Okay. Thank you, Ty. Ty Harris, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, sir. Very good. Very good. All right, Lewis, go ahead. I'll find it for you. Here, Pewin, where are we talking? July 3rd.
July 3rd.
Right. Okay. Sorry. July 1st.
So, yeah.
I got excited. He's in Long Lane.
Yeah.
Situation around dawn.
Yeah. And so
Long Lane.
It's just hard to extract yourself. And Thomas is the same way. They're skirmishing with Union soldiers up on Cemetery Hill. And so I think it would just take too long. The day is going by already to switch out these regiments. So
yeah, here, Cindy, if you want to go back to the thing, I'll show the audience there. There's I can't really make it out there, Perrin. No, wait. Where the hell am I? No, up here.
There you
Sorry,
go. Yeah,
Perry. It's blurry, but that's where he is. Okay.
This further reiterates what I just talked about. This is from James Lane, Brigadier General James Lane, one of the brigade commanders. Next morning, the skirmishing, being the 3rd, was very heavy in front of Thomas and Perrin, requiring at times whole regiments to be deployed to resist the enemy and drive them back, which was always most gallantly done. So they're just not sitting there idle. They are skirmishing, and that's why they're not used.
Okay.
Whereas it looks, why don't you use Thomas? They look fresh. Well, they're being used in another capacity,
Right.
not necessarily optimal to what you're trying to do.
So, that's a good. So we recently did a show with Stu Dempsey about Smith's Ridge, and that's what he calls Colt Park, basically.
Yeah.
And so we're talking about Orland Smith's brigade and the skirmishing that went on out there. Most famously, Richard Nixon's grandfather, was it grandfather or great-grandfather? Great-grandfather.
George 73rd
Nixon.
Ohio.
Yeah. He was mortally wounded out there. But there's a lot of skirmishing going on there throughout. It sounds like the whole battle, basically. Once they get into place, there's skirmishing
because
going on.
Because they're so close.
Right. So people say, well, Thomas doesn't seem to do anything. Well, that's because there's a neighborhood where Thomas's men were. And it's skirmishing.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's not deadly. Doesn't mean it isn't heavy at certain points. Yeah. It's just that it's not sexy.
Yeah.
So we don't hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think people lose sight of how close the lines are. And I used to point this out when I did the bike tours. I would cut across the Gettysburg Road in between KFC and Pickett's Buffet, the old Pickett's Buffet.
Yeah.
Hang a right. And then I'd stop there and look down the first road heading to the west. You can see West Confederate Avenue.
Yeah.
And you can turn around and you can see Cemetery Hill behind you.
Yes.
And I tell people, Colt Park and all this other stuff was open ground back then, and you could clearly see both lines. Yeah. We can't today because all the stuff is in the way.
Right.
So I don't because of. If you don't point it out, people are not going to try to envision certain things, and they don't think about how close these lines are. And that's that spot where Stu Dempsey's talking about, and they're doing all the skirmishing. But they're so engaged, you can't just pull them out.
Right.
So,
yeah. So it's hard when you are walking around certain areas where there's modern development on what should be national park. Really.
Yeah. The other thing I want to talk about till we move on to something else here is the other two units on the right, and that's Wilcox and Lang's brigades.
Yes.
They've been used the day before, and they're going to be asked to take part in some capacity on July 3rd. This is from Brigadier General Cadmus Wilcox. I love that name.
Yeah. Is it Cadmus or Camus?
I say Cadmus.
I'd like to say Cadmu, but
I was educated in Upper Marlboro, Maryland, man. I don't know.
No, I'm not saying
there's a Confederate.
I'm not saying that's in any way the right way.
Yeah.
I just like to say that.
I like Cadmus. There's a Confederate that is killed here. The name slips my mind like everything else does today. He was from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Mm-hmm. Cadmus reminds me of the little boy in Shane.
Okay, why?
They look alike.
Oh, I'd have to watch Shane again.
Oh, you dirty low down Yankee. I think it's dirty low down lion Yankee. He gets taken out. Alan Ladd gives it to him. Shane, come back, Shane. But he looks just like him. It's so funny.
Okay.
Anywho, here's. That's why I like this
Keep
show.
talking.
We're all over the place.
Right, exactly.
You can't edit that out.
We all have ADD. No, I would never edit
Here's
that out.
his official report, July 17th, 1863. With reference to action on the 3rd instant, I beg to report that early in the morning before sunrise, the brigade was ordered out to support the artillery under the command of Colonel Alexander. This artillery being placed along the Gettysburg Turnpike and on ground won from the enemy the day before. My men had nothing to eat since the morning of the 2nd and had confronted and endured the dangers and fatigues of the day. They nevertheless moved to the front in support of the artillery as ordered. The brigade was formed in line parallel to the Gettysburg Turnpike and about 200 yards from it, the artillery being in front much of it on the road and extending far beyond either flank of our brigade. My men occupied this position until 3:20 p.m. Our artillery opened fire upon the enemy's artillery and upon ground supposed to be occupied by his infantry. This fire was responded to promptly by the enemy's artillery and continued in the greatest vivacity on either side for about 1 hour. In no previous battle of the war had we so much artillery engaged, and the enemy seemed not to be inferior in quantity. Certainly they weren't. So that's what he's doing. And
so here, wait 1 second. Cindy, if you go to number 6. There we go. Okay.
That's a grain up.
So there's here's a little boy in Shane.
He's a towhead.
Okay. And then here's Cadmus Wilcox.
Am I right?
It kind of does. Yeah. It kind of does look like him. That's pretty good.
That little boy died young too.
Oh,
he didn't live a long life.
Well, now you're depressed.
I forget what happened to him. Oh, he's famous though. We'll always remember him.
Oh,
they both kind of cross-eyed with one eye.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. All right. Good call.
Yeah.
Good
Who's
call.
the other
That's
guy?
a talent, by the way.
Willie Pegram looks like somebody.
I will here. You keep talking.
All right.
I'll guess what Willie Pegram looks like by looking him up and looking closely at his face. Go ahead.
Let's see. Pickett's division now advanced after this artillery brigade and other brigades on his left. As soon as these troops rose to advance, the hostile artillery opened up upon them. They go forward. As they advanced, they changed direction slightly to the left so as to cover the part of the ground. He's talking about his group over which Pickett's division had moved. As they came in view of the turnpike, all the enemy's terrible artillery that could bear on them was concentrated upon them from both flanks and directly in front, and more than on the evening previous. Not a man in my division that I ordered to support could I see, but as my orders were to go to their support, on my men went down the slope until they came near the hill upon which the enemy's batteries and entrenchments.
All right. Okay, keep going. I got it.
All right.
Go ahead.
And then so he's supposed to be operating with Lang. This is what Lang writes. Let's see. Throwing forward pickets, the brigade remained quietly in this position until daylight on the 3rd, when I received orders from General Anderson to connect my right with General Wilcox's left and confirm my movements during the day to those of his brigade. I was at the same time notified that I would receive no further orders. He's just saying, whatever you do, you stick to Wilcox. Mm-hmm. About 7 a.m., Wilcox moves forward to support position of General Longstreet's artillery. I moved up on his left, put my command in front, and at the foot of the hill upon the batteries were in position, and the next time advancing my skirmishes to the crest of the next hill. Here we remained quietly until nearly 2 p.m., when the batteries opened a furious bombardment upon the enemy's stronghold, which lasted till nearly 4 p.m. And then he goes forward. They go forward after Pickett's starting to fall back. So it's too late. And what are they going into? They've got McGilvery's gun line still over there to the right, firing into them. And so instead of moving forward with Pickett on Pickett's right, and perhaps you prevent those couple regiments swinging out from the Vermont brigade that we did a tour on.
We did a tour on that, yeah.
They would have had these two other brigades coming towards them. And those Vermonters aren't able to do that if they go forward with Pickett. And again, goes to Mike's point too, communication. Mm-hmm. It's lacking. Mm-hmm. Lang is only told, conform on your right with Wilcox left, and you're not going to get any other orders. That's it. Wilcox kind of halfway knows what he's supposed to be doing, maybe not. But regardless, they're not, it's nebulous what they're doing. Nobody's really clear and concise what these orders are.
Right.
And I don't know who to blame for that. It's just, it doesn't work out.
Communication at that time, communication methods were more difficult, obviously. Today we have walkie-talkies, we have internet, we have all these ways you can communicate from over long distances. You didn't have them back then. And so one would think that an Army commander would make sure that his communication skills are as best as they could be for what is available to you at the time. And it sounds like it wasn't that important in the Army of Northern Virginia, at least here at Gettysburg.
Yes. And because when the morning comes,
or maybe not important is the word, but you know what I mean.
when the morning comes, it seems like we've got two different things going on. Longstreet wants to go around to the right. That's what he's planning. Lee expects him to attack.
Right.
Now, once we settle on Pickett's charge, Lee, A.P. Hill, and Longstreet are seen by several soldiers riding along the line. So there is a lot of communication going on there face to face because they're riding along the line, and presumably Lee's saying, this is what we want to do. This is where we want to hit. And they're all together. Mm-hmm. So.
All right. Before I show you.
I know who he looks like.
Okay.
I remembered.
All right. Wait. Write it down on a piece of paper. Take a pen and write it down on a piece of paper because we're gonna do this with the audience. I'm gonna go around the room.
Let me think of his name, his real name,
or you can what he's known for if you can't remember his name or something like that. Okay, Cindy, I got the microphone open back there, so I want you and Ty to participate in this. Go ahead, Cindy. Go to my screen and. Oh, you've probably already seen me searching. Okay, all right, Ty. Did you see me searching, Ty? Yeah. He saw it too?
Yeah.
Okay, then never mind.
I didn't know we were going to have a game show.
This is how we work on this show. We like to have a game show.
Yeah.
So let me get my game show music going. All right, and so here we go. Let's take a look. Go ahead, Sin. Here's Willie Pegram.
Yeah.
Now, for $30. Who does Willie Pegram look like? We're going to go to our first contestant, Louis Trott. Who do you think Louis Pegram looks like? Let me see the piece of paper you wrote it on. All right.
James Keach.
James Keach, Jesse James and the Long Riders.
Stacy Keach's brother.
Right.
That movie's filled with, it's got the Quades,
James
the Keaches.
Keach. Is that Keech?
Kea.
Kea. There it is. Yeah, well, shit. Okay, Keach. All right, let's
go to the Long Riders.
Long Riders. I think I remember now. Okay, that's a good one. Let's see here. I think it's now. Go ahead. You see that there, ladies and gents? Okay. Now, I think mine is better.
All right.
Are you ready?
Uh-huh.
Dustin Hoffman.
Oh, no.
Oh, come on. Look at this. Look.
Oh, no.
Look at the lips. Dustin Hoffman.
No. Go back to James. He's got the same lips and same stern face.
That is a close one.
Happy.
He's not happy. He's never happy.
He looks happy.
No, he's looking coy.
What is that, from The Graduate or something?
Probably. I don't know. I see both.
Take a poll.
I see more Dustin Hoffman in that.
I don't like Dustin.
What if I go to a clearer picture of Willie Pegram? Maybe this one here. People are like, God damn, will you stop with Willie Pegram? Let's see. Here we go. Now, Dustin Hoffman. Pegram, Hoffman. Pegram, Hoffman. Willie, Dustin. Willie, Dustin.
You're not showing James enough.
James.
See, people are... And look how small James looks.
Oh, well, I can't find a bigger one of him. I'm sorry. Let me see.
Humanity.
Let me see. Yeah, we'll be searching all day long.
Okay,
and people are going to now put in the comments. Oh, here. Here's another one. Okay, so here we got James Keach and Willie Pegram. So let's see, James Keach, Willie Pegram.
Oh yeah,
James Keach.
Just put some glasses on.
Willie Pegram. All right, you know what? I'm gonna say it's a tie.
All right. That is a very underrated Western, by the way. I love
it's
that. It's
a great one.
That is in the Sam Peckinpah tradition.
And it's all brothers playing brothers.
Yep.
How heartwarming.
Love that movie.
Of brothers who kill and rob being played by brothers.
Yeah. And you kind of like Frank and Jesse James.
You kind of do.
Yeah.
You kind of do. I can't deny it. All right. So where have we left off in the story here? I'm so sorry to the audience for the ADD.
Let's get to the artillery. I don't know where we're
all right.
So, because that's a big part of it. We've got this artillery preparation that they're going to do. So, to set it up, each corps of the Army of Northern Virginia has a battalion attached to the division. There's 2 divisions per corps. Three divisions.
Battalion of artillery.
Yeah, 3 divisions per corps. So there's 9 divisions. Each one of those 9 divisions has a battalion attached to it. That's different from the Army of the Potomac, which has a brigade attached to the corps. So within that,
but just
also,
sorry, the artillery battalion in the Confederate Army, artillery brigade in the Union Army.
It's got more batteries,
but essentially same idea, different name.
Yeah. When I was artillery, we had a number of batteries make up a battalion, a number of battalions make up the brigade then reports to division. That's how it was. But on the Confederate side, then within each corps, the 3 corps, you have a reserve artillery. In the 1st Corps, there's 2 battalions. One's under E.P. or Alexander, and the other one under Colonel Eshelman of the Washington Artillery. And that's one of the oldest batteries in the Army of Northern Virginia.
Right.
It started off early in the war.
Right.
Instead of having batteries, they have companies within these, we're always batteries.
Semantics.
Yeah. And so you have Eshelman and Alexander. Above them, in charge of the Corps Artillery, is John B. Walton. However, when preparations are made for this assault...
Did they say goodnight, John Boy, when they would...
Only when they were out in the valley of Virginia.
Okay.
Near the mountain.
All right.
So I used to love that show, too. Thursday nights on NBC, I believe, 8 o'clock.
I never watched it.
I loved it. Got kind of hokey towards the end, but
all
shows do. Yeah, all shows do. For whatever reason, they trust Alexander enough to put him in charge of this, not Walton. A.P. Hill has an outstanding artillery commander in Lindsey Walker. I got that right? Ruby Lindsey Walker, yeah. He's in charge of A.P. Hill's 3rd Corps Artillery. So very efficient, good artillerymen here. Alexander starts off the war in signals, and he develops the signal system and all that they're using with the flags and all that
right,
stuff.
At Manassas, he's the one that gives the warning, watch your flank or whatever. Your left, I think it was?
Yeah.
Yeah.
An old guy, he's either 53 or 54 here at Gettysburg, and I say 53, I don't know when his birthday is, what month. If his month is after July, he's 53. He's at West Point when Lee is there. So he's an old guy, and that is Brigadier General William Pendleton. He's the one that they put in charge of the artillery for the Army in Northern Virginia.
I'm glad you brought him up. What does he do? Not what is he supposed to do, but what does he do?
Here at Gettysburg?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm coming to.
Okay, sorry.
He is, he doesn't have his finest moment here at Gettysburg, but I think he gets a bad rap. People look at his age. He's a preacher. He goes to divinity school of some sort and becomes a preacher. So when they have, when the Army in Northern Virginia has this big religious revival, when they're in their winter encampment in the early months of 1863, who's leading it? Lee, Jackson, and Pendleton. Mm-hmm. There's the 3 top guys, and they're the most religious. Probably Longstreet's bitter about that. He's not included in the religious club. That's why probably argumentative. I don't disregard that. But earlier in the war, he is active. He's introducing or suggesting to the government and to Lee, and before that Johnson, some changes with the artillery as they're going along, learning how to use this arm of the Army. In early 1863, he writes to the Lee and the people in Richmond, we need to take these batteries and make them all the same type of gun. Now, they only have 4 guns because of lack of horses. And when they switch out all their James rifles, which are lighter and don't require 6 horses to be recast as Napoleons, they don't have the horses for all that. So that's why we have 4-gun batteries. But they're different types in most of the batteries here at Gettysburg. That's because most of the guns that they get, or a lot of them, come from Union guns that they've captured, and they're just sticking them in as replacements. And then you have the men who work on these guns, these sections. Here at Gettysburg, a section is 2 guns. When I was in the Army and I was a gun chief, a section was 1 gun. And I was in a 6-gun battery, and then when I was airborne artillery, we were an 8-gun battery, 4 guns with 2 platoons. And each gun was a section, a single gun. Here, it's 2 guns. You've got a Union 6-gun battery. You've got 3 sections.
So what's the point of calling it a section if you're just going to make it 1 gun? Why isn't it just a gun?
We just were
Or piece.
We were section. I don't know. We never called it a piece. We called it a gun.
Sometimes things don't make sense to me.
No.
I mean,
But
a
I
section
don't know.
makes sense because it's a division of
Yeah.
the overall unit.
Yeah.
And you would think it would be more than one individual unit, which I would consider the piece to be an individual unit.
Yeah.
So the section makes sense. And also, they can work together. But a single piece?
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm going to have to talk to the Army about that.
And I was always 6th section. I don't know how I managed that. I didn't ask for it, but I always ended up being 6th section.
Always
for some
last.
reason.
Always
No, I
last.
wasn't last.
Well, how many did you say?
Well, when I was a 6-gun battery, that was self-propelled 155. I did that for the first 4.5 years. Then when I arrived at Fort Bragg, airborne artillery, it was an 8-gun battery, so I was 6 of 8.
Okay, finally.
So yeah.
You were like, oh, thank God.
Yeah.
No longer last.
I'm not the end of the line. I don't have to put out the flank guard all the time because I'm not the flank.
Right.
But Pendleton in early 1863 is telling them we need to take these batteries and make them the same type of gun for just, it makes things easier, same type of ammunition, etc. But the men working in these individual pieces, they want to stay with their piece. It's what they're used to. They know how to operate it, so he's getting pushback from not politicians necessarily, but from the individuals working the guns. So they never switch. They do the best they can. So there's that problem. You got different ammo, different types of guns, long range, short range, spread out the line. So he's trying to fix this.
Is some of the resistance, what would the word be? Not proprietary, but like, is it these are our guns? You know what I mean?
It could be, yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Not. I'm not representing it the way I'm thinking in my head, but like almost like, especially if they were captured, even though they weren't captured by the men in the battery per se.
Yeah.
But if they were captured guns and then our battery was awarded them, it's a little more.
I know when I forget where it's at, but there's an incident where Jeb Stewart's cavalry captures some guns, and they're saying, well, we need to send all these guns to this depot and we'll dish them out as needed. And he's like, no, we're going to keep some of these for us. We captured them. So
right.
I forget when that was, but I remember reading that. I tell you all that long-winded stuff to say Pendleton is active. He's just not an old bystander sitting around his rocking chair reading the Bible waiting on the next action to occur.
Okay.
He is active before this campaign. At Chancellorsville, he's active on the tactical level because he's on Lee's right, that group that's facing Fredericksburg, and he is moving the cannon around in a tactical manner. He is active on the battlefield. Everybody's drawn to the left with the big assault from Stonewall Jackson and what happens there. But if you read the accounts of that, Pendleton's over there operating. Here, and he's doing a lot with, trying to get more ordnance to the Army, trying to improve the type of cannon they're using, trying to improve the powder and the fuses and all that. He's behind the scenes doing all that. So he's just not an old bystander. But you have a guy like Alexander. Alexander is so good of a soldier that after Fredericksburg, when they go into winter encampment, after the turn of the year into 1863, Stonewall Jackson wants to pull Alexander and make him an infantry commander of one of his brigades. And he gets pushback and like, all right, who we're going to put in charge of the artillery then to take his place? And they nominate John Pelham, who's one of the best Confederate artillerymen, but he's with the cavalry with Jeb Stuart. Jeb Stuart is not going to give up John Pelham. He ends up giving up because he dies, February of 1863 on the Rappahannock River.
Right.
But that's what they think of Alexander. The Jackson himself, who's very particular, he requests him to be promoted, and I don't think they want it to happen. Alexander turns it down too, despite the faster promotion in the infantry, a la John Gibbon. John Gibbon is an artilleryman, goes to the infantry, he gets promoted faster. Alexander stays with the artillery, but that's the level of experience and performance you have there with Alexander. So you don't have that level of experience and performance with our guy, Pendleton.
Okay.
For better or worse.
Okay. So here at Gettysburg, then he gets a bad rap.
He does. He is used with Lee's reconnaissance for day 2 along with Captain Johnson. It's two separate groups going out. So Lee is using him. But when it comes time to set up for this cannonade, it's Alexander who's in charge. He probably gets help from Lindsey Walker because it doesn't end there at the Point of Woods with Wolfowitz.
Right.
Which is Pichegru.
It's one of my favorite names.
Yeah. I mean, parents are so lazy now. We don't.
I know.
We don't come up with any names. Come on, people.
I know.
Let's start thinking.
I know. Cindy and I were out to dinner one night, and her waitress's name was Dungaree. I mean, it's like, come on. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dungaree.
Yeah.
She was very nice, though. Remember Cindy? Yeah.
Is Cindy awake? But, so the line doesn't end there. It continues on with AP Hill. And Ewell's artillery is supposed to take part in this assault as well. So, but I can't remember where I was, other than talking artillery, where I was going with this. And,
oops, I had myself.
Go ahead.
So you were setting up the artillery that, even though Walton is in command, the Longstreet gives it to Alexander.
Trust Alexander with
and then we got to, at the Army level, you have Pendleton.
Yeah.
And then I just took you on a tangent.
I think what Pendleton is remembered for is Alexander has this plan. After the cannonade, the infantry is going to go forward, and we got these howitzers back here that are not used. They don't have the range as the guns. We can roll these howitzers up. They're going to shoot over the infantry and drop shells onto the Union line. We'll move these up with the infantry. Sounds great. Pendleton takes them howitzers and moves them somewhere where nobody can find them. So I don't know if that changes the story or not. We'll never know.
Right.
But we do know what happens, and Pendleton gets a lot of grief for that. Mm-hmm. It goes back to Mike. Communication is severely lacking.
Yes. Okay.
Alexander does write, and this comes from the Southern Historical Society papers in 1877. Before daylight on the morning of the 3rd, I received orders to post the artillery for assault upon the enemy's position. If that is truthful, he knows early in the morning that that's what they're going to do. Later, I learned it was to be led by Pickett's division, directed on Cemetery Hill. Some of the batteries had gone back for ammunition and forage, but they were all brought up immediately, and by daylight, all of them on the field were posted. Deering's battalion with Pickett's division, and that's the battalion attached to Pickett's division, reported sometime during the morning. Okay. And they're following Pickett's division onto the field. And then we go into, and I don't really want to go into a lot. We know what occurred. These exchange of notes between Longstreet. He's putting the onus on Alexander. When you think the fires, you've had the optimal effect on the Union gun line up there, let Pickett know so he can go forward. So he's putting the onus because he really doesn't, instead of I'm in command here, I'll tell you when to go. That's how it should have been.
And that is where Alfin pointed out the highly irregular for a lieutenant colonel in the artillery to tell a major general commander of a division go, right?
Jackson's never going to do that.
Right.
So.
Right. What if Jackson were here?
Yeah.
He wouldn't do that.
Not taking the hill, but on the other end.
On the other end, so, he would not have done that.
This is one of my favorite things. And it has no bearing on anything. It's just some quotes stick out to me and they resonate with me, and this is one of them. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, I have been anxiously discussing the attack with General A.R. Wright, who said that the difficulty was not so much in reaching Cemetery Hill or taking it, that his brigade had carried the afternoon before, but that the trouble was to hold it, for the whole Union Federal Army was massed in a sort of horseshoe shape and could rapidly reinforce to the point to any extent. I just love the thought of them standing there in the peach orchard looking over there, and he says, yeah, you can get there, but you got to stay there. It's something about this conversation that they're having that I just...
Right, yeah.
Certain things just stick with me, and that was one of them. Here's some more from... So Alexander writes 2 books. The first one is Fighting for the Confederacy. The second one is Military Memoirs. When he's writing Fighting for the Confederacy, he's down in Nicaragua. He doesn't have internet access down there because it's crap. The infrastructure
spotty,
is substandard.
Right.
And so he doesn't have access in the 1890s to the ORs or anything anybody else is writing. But he has time on his hands, and he's writing his military memoirs. So There are differences between that and the more polished military memoirs when he's back in the States, and he does have access to a lot of stuff.
Okay.
He writes, during the evening, this is July 2nd, I found my way to General Longstreet's bivouac a little ways in the rear to ask the news from other quarters and orders for the morning. From elsewhere, the news was indefinite, but I was told that we would renew the attack early in the morning, that Pickett's division would arrive and would assault the enemy's line. My impression is the exact point for it was not designated, but I was told it would be to our left of the peach orchard. I was told, too, to select a place for the Washington artillery, which would come to me at dawn, and that's that other reserve battalion. So he's saying he's talking to Longstreet the evening of July 2nd, and he's getting all this. Again, it's memory 30 years later.
Yeah.
But if you read this and then read what Longstreet's official report was, Longstreet, he's not planning any of this. He's got scouts out trying to figure out if he can go around to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody's on the same page. That is the takeaway from all this. And when not everybody's on the same page, you have divergent views and divergent ideas about what you want to do, and things aren't going to work. You're pulling against the center. Oh. Oh, Lord. The problem with the artillery then, and I'm trying to avoid getting into what happened rather than what we hoped had happened on the Confederate side, is a lot of their rounds go long, faulty fuses. They've had this problem since the start of the war. Don't quote me on this, but I think when the war starts, from federal arsenals, they only get about 30 to 35 guns. So they're having to produce most of this stuff at this point. They are, except for what they capture on the battlefield. And in March of 1863, down in Richmond, there's a big explosion in the shop that makes the fuses and the primers, and it kills a bunch of women and young women and grown women that are working in these shops.
Right.
And that's these women, while they're working there, they've been trained to produce these items. And so you lose that experience. And so what they're getting is more faulty equipment when they come up here. But like I said, that's a problem they've dealt with since the beginning. Yeah. Faulty fuses. They always complain about it. You read the official reports. We get hung up on the 3 volumes dealing with this. I understand why. But once you read enough of this, go start reading outside of these and read the other ones prior to this, see what some of the problems are in the official records. It's fascinating, and that's one of them. So they deal with that. We talked about Pendleton, and it's a huge contrast to look at who the Union has in charge of their artillery, and that's Henry Hunt. Have you ever done an episode on him?
No, we haven't. We should do
Put
one.
me down.
All right.
One gun bunny talking about another gun bunny. We're hopping along.
There you go, Dave. Get on it, please.
But, and he had... We'll save it for that episode. But he has an interesting time of it being in charge of the Union's artillery. Sometimes he's not in charge. Sometimes he is. At Gettysburg, he is. When he comes up, he brings extra ammo unbeknownst to anybody else. He has that foresight to do that.
Smart.
But he knows how to operate. He is definitely more active on the tactical level than Pendleton is.
Okay.
And so that's the big contrast.
Is it because he's given rein to be and Pendleton is not? Or is it because of the way, is there an artillery reserve for the Army of Northern Virginia? Like
not a
Union
general
Army.
pool. Each corps has their own.
Right. So reserve. There's no Army reserve.
No.
But there is in the Army of the Potomac.
I think Pendleton may have been able to set that up if he so choose. I think he's thinking this is the best way to do it.
Okay.
Because up to this point, they're having a problem figuring out how to use artillery, how to use mass artillery, and keep it with large groups with these different divisions rather than have it spread out and then less effective. So they're always going through this. It's like when Lee reorganizes the Army after Jackson dies in 1863, the beginning, Hooker comes in and reorganizes the Army of the Potomac. They go from the Grand Divisions back down to 7 Corps. When Grant comes east, they reorganize the Army because they've got to dissolve 2 of the Corps. They've been 8 up. So they're always doing that on the Confederate side with the artillery and trying to find the optimal way to use it.
How come they don't just copy the Union structure?
They had their own thoughts, I guess. How much did they know of the structure? I'm not sure either. One thing is for certain, Henry Hunt is much more energetic at the tactical level than Pendleton is. Yeah. And I don't know if that's personality, age, energy level, what.
Right.
That's all speculation. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I will say that Pendleton is doing his best, and I think he gets faulted unfairly at times because of how things play out. Because even with, you take Pendleton, you've got Alexander. He's every bit as competent as Henry Hunt.
Mm-hmm.
He's not in charge of the big picture and
Right.
can't affect the big picture like Henry Hunt, but he's been put in charge of the gun line, and he's doing the best he can. They have enough guns to try to do what they're doing.
Sure.
The problem is they come up here with the ammo they have, and it's not as much as the Union has, because Henry Hunt does have the foresight, again, to bring up 20 extra rounds per gun that nobody knows about. He's got this extra secret stash he's bringing along, and it pays dividends. What the Confederates bring up here is what they got. It doesn't grow on trees. You can't forage for it.
Right.
You're living off the land. You got to wait till you get back to the Potomac to get more ammo, and that's part of their problem.
Okay.
So,
All right. So then his plan.
who's playing?
Lee's plan.
Oh, Lee's playing. Yeah.
So we talked about the artillery. So his plan now. So we're just because we did stray a bit into the artillery there. So getting back on track now. So the artillery is the plan is the artillery is going to pound the center.
It's
right?
going to pound the center. And what Alexander's gunners are trying to do is disable and minimize the return fire that's going to, from the Union artillery, that's going to affect the Confederate infantry going across, and to demoralize the Union infantry that's stacked up behind that wall on the other end of the field. So when your men are going across, there's less people and guns shooting at them. And that is what the idea with this big Confederate bombardment is. And, it only halfway works. There's the big argument between Hunt, and it goes to the other side of the field, so I don't want to get too deep into it, between Hunt and Hancock. Hancock wants the guns to keep firing on their side because it affects the morale of the Union troops. The Union troops hear their guns replying in counter battery. They're going to, have that moral fortitude to stand fast and not leave the line. Hunt realizes there's an infantry assault coming. We can't use all the ammo up. We need to. He goes down the line, tries to shut all the guns down. Wait till the infantry comes across. They're coming across. Save your ammo, and that is important because if you've got long range, and that's your rifle guns, your Parrots, 3-inch ordnance rifles. Those are the long range guns, and then the short range are your Napoleons. If you use up all your long range, you're only left with canister, and they only have so much canister per. There's only 4 or 5 rounds a canister per limber chest.
Right, because hopefully you don't need the canister.
Yeah. But if that's all you got left, that allows that Confederate infantry to get further across the field before you're affecting their progress with your artillery.
Right, okay.
You got to let them get within probably about 200 yards to really affect their progress. So if you save long range artillery, you can start firing at them when they first come out of the woods, because both lines can reach out and touch each other. So that's what the artillery is trying to do. Now, this is where it fails. And maybe Pendleton has, if he is more proactive, maybe he could have affected this and it doesn't fail quite as much. But there is a account from Major Thomas Osborne. He is in charge of the 11th Corps artillery. He's on Cemetery Hill. And during this cannonade, towards the left of A.P. Hill's line, some of A.P. Hill's guns are firing at Cemetery Hill. And he talks about all the wounded men that come in from this fire. But they turn their guns towards this fire, counter battery, and they silence these guns. They stop firing for whatever reason. And they don't have to worry about it anymore. If all the guns along, as they wrap around Cemetery Hill are firing on that point of Cemetery Hill, this converging fire, it's going to tear up the Union artillery because they're coming in from different angles and you can't concentrate on one spot.
Right.
That doesn't happen.
Right.
And that's where Pendleton could have been more active, should have been more active, and maybe affected the outcome a little bit greater on behalf of the Confederates, and it doesn't happen. I tend to think if you reverse the roles and it's Henry Hunt, he probably does.
So the cannonade on the Confederate side is it along the whole line that the cannons are firing on the Union position, or is it just Longstreet's guns and maybe some of hills.
It's supposed to be along the whole line.
It's supposed to be, but what actually happens?
And I think the Major Osborne's talking about fire that comes from AP Hill's left. When you
that would be like
when you come down West Confederate and you pass the fancy houses, and then you get to the Armory right next. If you're facing the Armory from West Confederate Avenue, you're looking east. Right to the right of that, the gun line starts.
Mm-hmm.
The Armory's not there at the time. Those fields, you could clearly see Cemetery Hill. If there's guns along there and they're pushed further out, they're where they are now because of the road. Pushing further out, they can all reach Cemetery Hill. If they're firing, they're the ones that are affecting this converging fire. How much they fire, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look and see what they report, and I hadn't done that.
But wouldn't they have to worry about guns on Cemetery Hill firing on them?
Yeah, but if you've got this ring around you firing on you,
doesn't matter.
It's hard to concentrate. You will be able to fire back, but you're occupying them from different angles.
But how about from more of a northerly direction, like the town?
Yeah.
Like, is anything coming from the town?
No, not that I know of. I think the Whitworths might fire some. They've got the 5-mile range. But those, if you've ever seen those shells, those are small shells. And they're not exploding. It's solid shot.
Yeah.
So I think they're firing, but not enough, regardless, not enough. And then, the day before Andrews' battalion gets tore up, that's Latimer over there on Benner's Hill. Andrews gets wounded at Chancellorsville, so he's not here. They get eaten up. And so there's not many guns over there left to fire. And that's really the only good artillery platform on that end of the line to fire on. And we see what happened the day before. Mm-hmm. So they're not participating. You just don't get the full effect from the Confederate artillery that I think Lee had hoped. It's more active along Alexander's line, portion of the line, and then probably in front of Pettigrew and Trimble's area of the line than those areas where the infantry is not going to assault, meaning behind roads, back behind where Colt Park is now, in those areas. So I think that's where they start based on, again, what Major Osborne wrote about. Somebody's firing at him and doing pretty good damage, but nobody else is. So he's able to turn his guns and silence those guns.
All right. So now I got to move it along because we're running out of time.
Yeah.
All right. So the plan for the infantry, the artillery softens everything up. What's the plan for the infantry? Pickett's fresh division.
Along with the other ones.
Along with the other ones, but yeah.
So Burkett Fry takes over the Tennessee Brigade that was previously under the command of James Archer. He gets captured on the 1st. Burkett Fry is on Pettigrew's right flank. Mm-hmm. He thinks he's the guide brigade. In other words, he's going to go straight across. Pickett, there's a gap between that line and Pickett's line. And if you remember the movie, Pickett goes down with a stick and he says he's drawing how he's going to maneuver his troops to get across the field. And he's going to do this oblique to the left. That's to close the gap. But Fry writes that he's been told he is the guide brigade, and he's just going straight across. So the plan is for these two wings. We've got the Pettigrew Trimble wing on the left facing east, and we have Pickett on the right. The plan is for the infantry to go across, close this gap that exists between these two wings, and arrive on Cemetery Ridge as one. And then hopefully the line has been softened by this artillery. There's less artillery firing at these men. The Union infantry up there has been demoralized, and they can punch a hole and then presumably head to the left and unseat the Union Army.
Okay. Sounds like a plan. Yes.
I like that. That's pretty good. Instant messenger.
Yeah. Just wanted to beef up some audience.
Now, let me see if I can find it real quick. I found this from, it is from Alexander. Let's see here. Military Memoirs of a Confederate. So.
6 Questions points out in the comment section that E.P. Alexander wrote that one of the only advantages of the exterior lines was that from an artillery perspective, you can place artillery to effect a converging fire onto a single spot.
Yeah. Yep. And That's what's hoped for, and that's what doesn't happen. He also writes in Military Memoirs, that second book he writes, a clump of trees in the enemy's line, we know what the clump is, was pointed out to me as the proposed point of our attack, which I was incorrectly told was the cemetery of the town. And about 9 a.m., I began to revise our line and post it for the cannonade. So there's a question, and Troy Harmon used to bring this up too, a couple of the talks he did. And I've never met Troy. I've watched his stuff and all that.
Fantastic fella.
He's smart. And he has a great disposition to tell stories that keep you interested, that's for sure. And there's this, what is the actual aiming point? Is it the clump of trees? Is it Ziegler's Grove? Is it Cemetery Hill?
Scott Hartwig did an article about this very question, if I recall. And I believe it was Harrison from Pickett's staff. I'm not sure, but went along with Batchelder. You know this? Are you familiar with this?
I don't know.
Have you heard this?
Probably.
And not too long afterwards, and he was pretty certain that what we know as the copse of trees is what they were supposed to converge on, not Ziegler's Grove.
Yeah, and that's why I read that quote. They think, because they're not over there, the Confederates don't know what's behind the line.
Right.
But they know there's a cemetery over there, and people are telling Alexander, hey, there's the cemetery where that big clump of trees is. Mm-hmm. So you make that your aiming point, and then other people say, yeah, we're going over there. That's where the cemetery is. People can take from that, oh, we're attacking Cemetery Hill.
Well, do you think that, right, and that's the other thing too, is
misnamed.
that, but they just called that whole area Cemetery Hill.
Probably, yeah.
It's a cemetery, calling it Cemetery Hill and Cemetery Ridge is a post-battle thing that historians, I think, have given the name to. So it's not that they had a map that said, well, this is Cemetery Hill and this is Cemetery Ridge. It's written on the map. Like nobody thought of it that way until afterwards.
Yeah.
And, but now do you think it's that this idea comes from because the Pettigrew and Trimble column is essentially going straight ahead, whereas Pickett's has to close this gap and they move at an oblique angle, which would indicate that if everything was perfect, the lines going forward, if they converge at the same time, or maybe a little sooner and hit the line and do some damage, then the lines coming in at the angle can roll the line up while, kind of like hold them by the nose, kick them in the pants type of a thing. Yeah. Do you think that's where that idea comes from? Or
well, first of all, I think the gap exists because of the terrain. And so if you want them all to arrive at one point, and it's at least at the copse or further north, somewhere along there, you're going to have to swing Pickett to the left. So I'm not sure. I hadn't thought of that.
It just all sounds so fanciful to me, considering, Lee had to have known that he might have had enough men and he had a lot of confidence in his men to make an attack and break a line, but he had to know he didn't really have much of anything to exploit the breach.
No.
So,
but he's telling everybody, hey, these, like Rhodes is one, I've been told if I see an opportunity and that opportunity.
Yeah. But that's so like wishy-washy. If I see
he's having a wishy-washy kind of day.
Right. He is but think about it. Like think of all the smoke and everything. How are you seeing any opportunities? Yep. And if you do, again, it's, if you see an opportunity, then I can what?
Yeah.
What do you want me to do? Just go straight in and
it's a big
figure it out?
Pickett gets to the area, I think around 2:00 on July 2nd. Mm-hmm. Bring him up. And at the very least, if he follows Ambrose Wright's brigade, you're going further. And, there's a lot of, you don't know what's going to happen in all that confusion if you go further east. Past where Wright claims he gets.
Okay.
Up on some mountain somewhere.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Let me read this real quick, and then we'll probably get to the questions, I assume.
Yes.
It's just a funny anecdote, and this is from Stonewall, gunner with Stonewall, William Pogue, and he's one of the battalion commanders. He writes, and this is July 3rd, General Lee often stopped here at his Pogue's battery. About 10 a.m., he was here viewing the field when a handsomely equipped officer came cantering from the right about 75 yards in front of our lines, and we got opposite our guns. General Lee called out to him, my friend, this way, if you please. I can see Martin Sheen doing that.
Yeah.
and beckoned him to come to where he was at my guns. The officer wheeled and trotted up, saluting as he halted in front of the general, who exclaimed with affected surprise, "Ah, Major, excuse me. I thought you might be some countryman who had missed his way. Let me say to you and to these young officers that I am an old reconnoitering officer and have always found it best to go on foot and not expose oneself needlessly." Remember, what is he doing in the Mexican War?
Yeah.
He's belly crawling.
Right, exactly.
Deering at once caught his meaning and saluting with some embarrassment, passed through the guns and rode off in rear of his lines. That's Deering. He's in charge of Pickett's battalion.
Right, right.
I just like little anecdotes like that.
I must have
fun.
all possible information.
And to think that's the guy going to kill, what's his face?
Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando.
Yeah.
There's no time.
That's a wacky movie.
It is a wacky movie. The best part, my favorite part of that movie is Robert Duvall.
Mine too.
Yeah.
It's the only
I think
part
everybody.
that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a straightforward war movie at that point.
And it's funny that I don't know how many people remember this or realize that Lawrence
Fishburne's in it. Yeah,
is the guy.
He's a kid.
Yeah,
yeah.
He's
and Harrison Ford.
Yeah, but he's got a bit part.
Yeah, but still, he's in there.
He's there.
You know, he's there.
So,
all right. So we're talking about Apocalypse Now for the youngsters out there who don't know what we're talking about. It's a great movie, weird movie, but really just skip to the Robert Duvall part and you'll love it. Anything else you want to add about Lee's plan before we go to the questions?
Not that I can think of. And I feel better at this point than I did on that Saturday morning.
Fantastic.
Yeah, or afternoon.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. I hope people understand what I've been trying to convey and I haven't confused people.
Yeah, well, that's wonderful.
That's the fear of this.
What?
And I know Jesse talks about that too when you're on this show or any show, but we come on this one that you're out there. You're putting yourself out there like you do it, but you're a professional and you do it for a living.
Not too much is
some people
about
you don't want to say the wrong thing and because everybody will call you out.
Oh, it's terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I went on another show a couple weeks ago, and ever since then I've been replaying the whole conversation in my head because we were having fun and we were just talking and I'm like, wait, what did I say about this? What did I say about that? And everything. I'm like,
what show did you go on? Maybe I'll listen.
The History Things podcast.
I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, it's a good one.
There's so many shows in so little time. It used to be books, not shows.
I know. Well, whatever. You got to do what you got to do. You listen to what you can.
I stick with what I'm loyal to.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
Me and my 14-year-old daughter, Anna Lee.
Good. There you go.
I get Lucy on board. She'll subscribe.
That'll be perfect. All right. So we'll take a quick break. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll come back after these words with your questions.
The Gettysburg Museum of History, located right here in the center of Gettysburg, PA. Owner and curator Eric Dorr grew up here and has spent his life collecting and preserving history through artifacts ranging from the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, World War II, presidential items, pop culture, and more. His museum is free and open to visitors Wednesday through Sunday, 11 to 5 p.m., where you can stop by and immerse yourself in some of the most amazing artifacts that you would never believe exist in the middle of Gettysburg. If you're a fan of Band of Brothers and Everything Easy Company, you'll love his exhibit featuring the Dick Winters collection and artifacts from D-Day. You can even own your own piece of history by buying one of the many relics they have for sale in the museum and on the website GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com. The Gettysburg Museum of History is a non-profit 501c3 organization with a foundation that allows all purchases and donations to keep the museum operating and open free of charge. They have been featured on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, the Smithsonian Channel, and the Science Channel. Now you can check them out on American Artifact, the series on the YouTube channel, The History Underground. So that's the Gettysburg Museum of History at 219 Baltimore Street or the GettysburgMuseumofHistory.com.
That's another great question.
dragging ass out of bed. The hair's mussed up on your head. You picture the 20th Maine, and you're happy once again. Fight the battle against being slow with Little Brown Top Road.
Yum, yum, give me some Little Ground Top. Ladies and gentlemen, we know it, we love it. It's the best thing in the world, and it is at Bantam Roasters, or it's at addressinggettysburg.com/cafe. Little Ground Top, the blend, is from Bantam Roasters, as I said, nestled in the historic town of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. It's a well-crafted coffee that showcases a beautiful blend of flavors. The combination of cacao, wildflowers, and toasted sugar creates a nuanced cup of coffee that is both intriguing and satisfying. It's a great choice for those who appreciate a complex profile with a touch of sweetness and floral elegance. Whether you're a seasoned coffee drinker or just looking to elevate your morning routine, this blend is sure to impress. So whether you're near or far, let Bantam Roasters bring a taste of Gettysburg to you. Like I said, stop in at Bantam Roasters at 82 Steinware Avenue, right across from the Dobbin House. After you have your dinner at the Dobbin House, go across the street and get a bag of Little Ground Top, bring it home, and you'll be so happy you did. Or you can go to addressinggettysburg.com/cafe and order your Little Ground Top. You will not be disappointed. Thank you very much.
You're listening to the Addressing Gettysburg podcast with Matt Callery.
All right, and we're back, and we've got some questions here for Lewis Trott. These questions are submitted by some of our awesome patrons over at patreon.com/addressinggettysburg. If you'd like to submit questions for our guides to answer and to get exclusive content that takes a closer look at all things Gettysburg and the Civil War, please consider joining Patreon today. Patreon.com/addressinggettysburg.com. That's Patreon. Okay. Dave Pellin starts us off today. He says, how does the Army present the charge on staff rides? What? How does the Army present the charge on staff rides? Is it viewed as a cautionary tale?
Unfortunately, I have no idea because I'm not qualified to do the staff rides yet.
Yeah, okay, I get it.
So,
the current Army is what he said.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know because I don't. Hopefully, I'm working towards that, but I haven't been on a staff ride. I'll let you know when I do know, though.
All right. Ron Chisulo, I believe somebody who is in the top 20 of people who passed the guide exam. Yes, Ronnie, congratulations. He says, I've frequently wondered why the Confederate troops posted in the long lane area running north into town seemed to sit back and watch as the left flank of Longstreet's assault moved forward and was flanked by Union units such as the 8th Ohio. Infantry am aware that Smith's brigade may have played a role, but it still seems they could have kept some skirmishers in place to deal with that while sending others to at least harass the Union flanking units. What do you think about that?
I think we kind of covered it.
Kind of did.
They are
he
skirmishing.
He kind of gave the answer in the question there. Yeah.
And
that's why he passed.
Keep in mind where the 8th Ohio's monument is misplaced.
Incorrect.
Yeah, incorrect. Yeah. You need to. It probably got put there for this is the spot that's available.
Maybe they had to build a hotel or something. How much further up was it?
Into the up
into town,
Steinware. Maybe by Friendly's or something like that. I think somewhere in there. Yeah.
Kind of the hotel.
Yeah.
All right. Peter Crary says, I hope I pronounced that right. Peter Crary, Crary. I'd like to know why Lee thought this charge would succeed despite Longstreet's objections. I've always thought Lee became overconfident after his victories at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. He thought his soldiers were invincible and far superior to the Army of the Potomac. I don't think he realized how much of those victories were due to the incompetence of Burnside and Hooker. He said his army could do anything if properly led, but unlike Grant, he didn't seem to understand what Lincoln called the awful arithmetic.
I don't know. He's cognizant of Meade being in charge, and he makes the comment when he finds that out, Meade's not going to make a mistake, and if I make a mistake in his front, he's going to make me pay. So He does think his army can overcome a lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's overconfident.
But I also think that, aren't there other examples of Lee? Doesn't he? I feel like I heard a story once where some of his, I don't know if it was officers or men, were denigrating the Yankees, and he kind of like bit their heads off about it or something like that. Is it like he had a respect for them because they were not as, I think history remembers them as kind of bumbling and not too good, but I don't think that's actually true. And I think Lee understood, and he had a respect for them. Yeah. Even though they were those people or the enemy. And
they were misled at times. I mean, Hooker does a great job up until the moment he needs to continue. Mm-hmm. And he lets somebody get on his right flank and ignores all the warnings with Stonewall Jackson at Chancellorsville. So Lee takes chances. He did it at Chancellorsville, and he has to. I think on July 3rd, by the time July 3rd comes, Lee probably, this is all speculation, we don't know what really Lee is thinking, down to the, all of his thoughts. But they come close on July 2nd, and he's thinking one more push. I do think that he feels we've done nothing but push the Union Army around. We haven't been able to totally defeat them, which is impossible to do in Civil War times, but we've pushed them around enough to think that we can probably do this. I caution to use this, but there's a hint of desperation of what transpires on the 3rd. Mm-hmm. Lee knows they've been sitting in place now for 2 days. They're having to go further afield for their forage and such to feed the army and specifically the horses and stuff. The ammunition is what they have, and he's got one more shot. And what are you going to do with this shot? The first plan goes awry. It's probably not going to work. Regardless, what can we do? And this is what he comes up to. So I think he wants to attack one more time. He doesn't want to leave here and leave something on the table. And this is what he comes up with. And it's got a tinge of desperation in it. I'm not saying that he's desperate, but again, I think that he's here. He's saying, I got one more shot at this. I can't leave here and without taking that shot. This is what I've come up with. And again, I go back to the beginning. What if he has a less quarrelsome corps commander that he's putting in charge of the operation?
Who strikes while the iron is hot, if it's hot.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll never know. It's speculation, but I hope that answers the question.
Brian Derenick says, and we kind of touched on this, but the end of his question is, I think, the part that should be answered here. Brian says, were any contingency plans made ahead of time by the Army of Northern Virginia in the event the Pickett's charge failed to prepare for a possible Union counterattack? I've only ever read that such actions did not occur until after the actual repulse. So if Pickett's charge failed, did he plan for that? What would he do? I'm like
Brian. I've only heard about what happened. As the commanders are falling back, he tells them we must reform our lines and look towards the enemy. Yeah. There are more men back there that don't go forward. But they're not back there
entrenching or anything.
No.
Setting up any defenses.
And the Army of Northern Virginia only has so much artillery cannon fire left in them. They only have so much ammo left over to try to repulse this. So I don't think there's a contingency plan that's stated anywhere that I've read. This is what we're going to do in case this thing fails, because they think it's going to work somehow, some way. Other than when it happens in the moment, we must look to our men and reform our lines, and that's what they end up doing.
Jeffrey Pasnick says, with how close they came on July 2nd, had Lee simply been blinded to wanting his decisive victory on Northern soil as to what he was asking for a center assault? So do you think that Lee had just, as they say, like his blood was up and he just wanted to...
And I hate that Longstreet writes that. And he does that in his memoirs. And I've read that book. It's a tedium read, and he's just grinding axes with Early, Braxton Bragg, and for some reason he doesn't like Evander Law. But he writes that his blood was up, and it's not going to he's not going to be satisfied until that is saturated. Again, what I just said is what I think happens. He knows he's got enough for one more shot. he's not going to leave here without taking that shot. So I don't think it has anything to do with his blood being up and all this other stuff. I think he's trying to win the war, and he can't. We see what happens in 1864 when he's on the defensive for most of the time. Slowly, the attrition is wearing his army down. He knows he has to attack, and this is the moment.
Yeah.
And so I think that answers that question. At least I hope it does.
Rob Fry says, is there any written evidence that Wright's breakthrough in the same area of the Union line on July 2nd had any bearing on Lee's thoughts going into his planning of the attack?
I think Wright comes back and tells anybody that listen, we were up there, saw the whole infernal Yankee army.
Do we know that Lee or Longstreet heard this?
I don't know.
Or even Pickett? Does he go to Pickett?
He's talking to Alexander in the peach orchard, but that says everything's already planned and we're going forward. I've never seen anywhere where he goes, I don't know who Lee talks to on the evening of the 2nd, that contributes to this overall plan of what takes place. Again, the evening of the 2nd, Pickett's charge is not Lee's plan. Lee's plan is we're going to continue the attack, and that gets disrupted beginning at 4:30 in the morning. So that puts in question what Alexander's writing when he goes to see Longstreet on the evening of the 2nd. We're going to assault somewhere to the left of the peach orchard using Pickett's brigade. Is that a continuation of the assaults on both flanks, or is he talking about what becomes Pickett's charge? I don't know.
Matthew McClanahan says, was a frontal assault on the Federal Center the best of the bad options Lee had on July 3rd? If not, what should Lee have done?
I guess it is the best of the options once the Union Army attacks. Again, it disrupts his original idea for a plan. Once that's gone, where can you attack? If you can't attack on that end, you can't attack the round tops again because that's impossible. You don't have the men and equipment down there to do it. So you move further up the line. You presume, like he says, the Union Army has supported both flanks. They must be weak in the middle. Let's go for the middle. No.
Where do we know where Lee observed the charge from is another question of his.
And getting back to Troy Harmon, I think in one of his lectures, Troy Harmon states the North Carolina monument.
But the monument wasn't there back then.
I know. And, you probably have other gawkers around there taking pictures of that monument while this is happening. Do you really want to stand there with those gawkers?
Yeah.
I don't know. I sort of think it's in the middle. That's where the Virginia monument is, but I'm not sure.
Okay, and then he says, please tell Lewis he does a great job. As my grandma Rue would say, thank you for being a friend.
Well, thank you, Matt. That means a lot.
Moving on to Ron Moore, he says, I was wondering if Lee had any actual plan to follow up if the attack had broken the center of the Union line.
I think we answered that one.
Yeah.
We did good.
Robert McGee, he says, or is it Maggie? Well, let's say McGee. I like McGee better.
I think it's McGee.
I've heard all kinds of stories about George Pickett's after-action report never being filed, from Pickett not submitting it out of anger to Lee burying it to Lee. Okay, sorry. Punctuation, Robert. I've heard all kinds of stories about George Pickett's after-action report never being filed, from Pickett not submitting it out of anger to Lee burying it because it was so scathing towards Lee. Any idea where the truth lies?
The story I've always heard that Pickett complains about other commanders not supporting him in this disastrous attack that tears up his division. And so because that obviously would affect the morale of the Army of Northern Virginia leadership going forward, Lee tells Pickett, we got to redo this. And he tears it up because he doesn't want all those complaints and criticisms of these other commanders. We don't need this at this time.
Right.
What that does, though, it severs the relationship between Lee and Pickett forever.
Okay.
So.
All right. And then we have very quickly, we have an Australian and international call on the line. So, good day, Grant. How are you?
That's an excellent accent attempt.
Yeah, Lewis does a Cockney accent. Hello, Governor.
It's the only one I know.
What's up, Grant?
Rode any good ruse lately?
Sorry, I only just got up and saw the notification, so I don't know if you've covered this already. But Lee, did Lee have any plans for like a second wave? What was there any ideas in his head of any sign of success he was going to put another wave through, even though he didn't really have fresh troops whatsoever?
I have told you there is no time for that.
We've covered that one. Go back and re-listen. Next question. No,
Just rewind it.
We
Grant.
did. Yeah, and it's if the other commanders that would be involved in this theoretical second wave all say that they've been told if they see an opportunity where this is working, they can send forward troops. But there's no formal, all right, we're going to send these two Pickett, Pettigrew, Trimble's brigades in divisions across, and once they get to a certain point, we want this second wave to come in. It's paraphrased and couched in, if this is successful and you see an opportunity, and I read that from Robert Rhodes' official report, go ahead and send men forward and take advantage of this opportunity. So is that a second wave? You could call it that, but when I think of a second wave, I think of it more formalized. We've got this second line that we're going to send in as a follow-up. There's no such thing as that. It's all, if you see an opportunity, avail yourself of that opportunity.
All right. Very good. Grant, thank you very much for the call.
Thanks, Grant.
Just one other question, son.
2 for 1 then.
Go ahead, old timer.
In the documentary I saw that got me first interested in the battle, Longstreet got down on the ground and used a stick in the dirt to plan. Is that true?
Documentary.
I think that was Pickett with his stick.
No, it was Longstreet.
The Gettysburg Museum has that stick. That's a lie. I made that up.
Oh, that's good. All right. That was good, Grant. Thank you very much. It's good to hear from you.
Thanks, Mark.
All right. We'll talk to you later, Gary. All right. So that is it for us here, ladies and gentlemen. Lewis, thank you kindly
It's
for
always
coming
my pleasure.
in.
Thank you for everybody listening.
I'm glad you feel, do you feel redeemed
I
now
feel
that
better.
you feel, okay,
if I
good.
get the Mike Lentz seal of approval and Rich Schneider, I feel pretty good.
Good. Let's see if they answered that question I didn't see. Mike Lentz, LOL. Hello, friends. Sounds like going in. Sounds going in and out. You can't get a handle on it. Garden's on. No, I don't. Nobody answered you there, so I guess they didn't like it. Sorry, Lewis.
Well, no sleep tonight.
No sleep tonight. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for us here at Addressing Gettysburg's Ask a Gettysburg Guide. Thank you for your participation in the show, for the callers and the commenters and the patrons, of course, most especially for sending in their patrons and for their continued support over at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg. We will talk to you next time.
Our hearts so stout have got us famed, forsooth 'tis known from whence we came. Wherever we go, they dread the name of Gary Owen in glory. Instead of spa or drink down ale and pay the reckoning on the nail, no man for debt shall go to jail.